She wasn't in pain. She was just afraid to move. This is the story of a 40-year-old woman who came to me after having a surgery on her low back. It was the first surgery she ever had, and she was very scared. She was afraid she was going to break the surgery. So when she walked into the room, she would grasp her thighs with her hands and walk very, very slowly and gingerly. First thing I said to her was, "Are you in that much pain?" She said, "No, I'm just afraid that I'm going to undo the screws that were put in." So we started working together, and over the course of a few months, we got to know each other. We became more and more comfortable with each other. But I noticed about her, she's a very conservative person. She was afraid that anything she was going to do was going to be too much and she was going to hurt herself. So I knew I had to progress her very, very slowly. Go at her pace. You don't want to push too hard. So as the months went by and she started getting stronger and stronger, she felt a little more comfortable moving, started doing more and more. She would always say to me every time I would ask her to do an exercise, "You're so mean, you're so mean." I said, "Why am I so mean?" She said, "Because you're making me do all this work." She started really working hard. She had progressed to doing standard planks, meaning on her toes and elbows, for 45 seconds plus, something she'd never done before the surgery. So I was very happy with the progress. She was thrilled with the progress. She would actually bring her kids. She's brought her daughter and her son to actually watch mom do what mom was doing. I remember this very vividly. It was her last visit. And she sat outside rather than walk in. And I walked up to her and I said, "Is everything okay?" She said, "Yes." And she said it with a very grumpy face. And I said, "Are you ready to get started?" She said, "Yes." And she hands me a bag and she says, "This is for you." I said, "What is this?" She goes, "Well, look at it." So I'm looking at it. I open up the box. There's something called a brown key, something I never heard of, basically a cross between a brownie and a chocolate chip cookie. Delicious, by the way. Chocolate covered strawberries, lemon muffins, another type of, I'm a chocolate person in case you don't know. And just beautiful, beautiful pastries. She spent a fortune on this thing. I said, "What's this for?" And she said, "It's because you're so mean." I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "You're the only one that ever pushed me out of my comfort zone. And I know that if you hadn't done that, I would have never gotten better." So I said, "Okay, now that we got this out of the way, let's go ahead and get started." She said, "Wait, one more thing. I wrote a letter for you. I didn't want to say this in person because I knew I'd screw up. So let me go ahead and read it to you. Is that okay?" I said, "Sure." So basically, she went and proceeded to tell me her story, how this happened and how she felt. And if it wasn't for this very mean therapist that she worked with, she would have never gotten out of her shell and felt comfortable to do the things that she was finally able to do, that she was able to get her life back. It brought me to tears. Anyway, sometimes the hardest step isn't physical, it's mental. Can you relate? Please comment below.